Hi, I'm Garrett with IDC Woodcraft. If you're brand new to CNC routers and you're trying to figure out what CNC router bits you need to get, well, you're going to get that answer in this video. In fact, by the time you're done with this video, you're going to know a lot more than most CNC router owners out there, because this is going to be a deep dive into CNC router bits. What you're going to learn are the 8 different family types of CNC router bits. You're going to learn about the cutting edges, because there are different cutting edges, and it's going to make a big difference with your CNC router, how it operates, whether you get good cuts or bad cuts. And we're going to discuss what CNC router bits are made of, because they are made of different materials, and that's going to make a big difference in the life of the bit that you buy. And then I'm going to give you some demonstration of some of these router bits. And finally, we're going to go over what you need to get started and what you don't need to get. The good thing is by the time you're done, you're going to have a whole new understanding of CNC router bits and what you can do with a CNC router, because they do a lot more than just cut wood, which you'll learn as you move along. But this video is going to give you a little heads up. Now, if you're impatient and you really just have to know what bits you want, there are timestamps down below in the description. However, I would suggest you not do that, because you can make bad choices and not even know it. So without further ado, let's just dive right on in and start talking about CNC router bits.
There are generally 8 different types of bits that are used, and we are going to walk through them from the most common to the least common. The first is the end mill. The end mill is a side cutting tool, as is the majority of these, meant to cut a flat bottom. It is notable by the flat bottom you can see right here. So an end mill will cut a square slot or profile things out with a square corner in it. The next and most common bit is the V-bit. Now this is one that has an angle at the point. The V-bit is most commonly used for lettering and for detailed designs around lettering or somewhere on a sign. The V-bit generally has different angles of grooves here, and you'll find that you will use this all the time to add the style and flair to your CNC projects. So these two are the two that you will use most of the time and will be buying right up front. The next one is a ball nose. Now the ball nose is essentially the same as an end mill, with the exception that the end is radiused. So this leaves a nice little rounded contour around the edges of signs and other projects that you may be doing. And sometimes it's used in lettering as well, to give the lettering a more calm feel to it. The difference between these two is this will allow you to create sharp corners in the letters. And then you have the surfacing bit. Now the surfacing bit is basically a very large end mill with a couple of variations to it. The surfacing bit is intended to take out a lot of material at one time and is typically used to smooth out the spoil board on your CNC router, or just to hog out a lot of material. This is what a surfacing bit does. It'll either condition the surface of your spoil board or a bad piece of wood when you do a botched job. Of course, this is sped up quite a bit.
Okay, so we've covered the 4 basic bits that you're going to have to get into your arsenal, which we will discuss more later. Now, I'm not demonstrating everything right now. I will do that later on in the video. I just want to give you a feel for some of the things that these things do. We're going to start diving into the specialty bits now, so let's get to it.
This is a carving bit. This is what you will find being used to carve out 2.5D relief projects or 3D relief projects that have a lot of fine detail. The next one is the T-slot cutter. You will use this to cut out the slots in the back of signs so they can hang up on the wall. Next is a bowl cutter. Now what you'll find with a bowl cutter is it's got that radius on there like the ball nose does, but it's much wider and it has a flat bottom to it. This bit is in the same family as the surfacing bit, where it's designed to hog out a lot of material, but to leave a rounded finish at the bottom of the cut. Next is the engraving bit. Now this is often used to etch designs on glass, wood, and metal. This is actually my favorite bit to use and favorite thing to do. I have a very good detailed video that walks you through this process and shows you what it can do. I will put a link down below in the description for this, and a flag will pop up right now. The engraving bit falls into a class of what's called drag bits. This is where the spindle of the CNC router is not turned on, but rather the bit drags around the project. Now, this is called a diamond drag bit. It's got a very fine diamond point on the very end, and it's really good for engraving glass and acrylic and metal, like I said. However, there are pens that you can use, different colors. There are knives for cutting vinyl. So there's a whole class of bits out there in the drag bit land, and that will be in the list that I give you, so you'll know where to get that kind of stuff when you're ready to move into some of this awesome stuff. So those are the standard, most common bits that you will find for CNC routers.
Okay, so we've got the basics out of the way. You understand what kind of router bits are out there. Now we're going to start getting into some of the technical stuff. We're going to talk about the cutting edges of the router bits. This is important for you to understand. Most CNCers don't know this at the deeper levels that I'm going to be training you on. So by the time you come out of this, you're going to know a whole lot more than a lot of people. And it's important information, because if you don't have this in your head, and it's going to affect the way that your router is going to perform, and ultimately the finish that you're going to get out of it. So this is why this stuff is important. So let's dive on in and keep on going.
The cutting edges are the blades that are actually shearing the material. Each cutting edge is called a flute. Now you have the surfacing bit here, and technically a flute is this entire area of the router bit. So the flute will be this whole area of the body of this round ball nose bit. Typically there are 2 flutes on each CNC router bit. So if the way you can count it is there's 1 there, I'll rotate it 180 degrees, and there's 2. In the case of this surfacing bit, there are 3. Sometimes you'll have more. Just so you know, the more flutes that you have does not mean that the faster the bit can go. In fact, it's less. The more flutes you have, the better finish you'll get. But traditionally, a CNC router turns so fast that 2 flutes are quite sufficient. Now we're going to get into the orientations of the flutes. There are 3 different orientations you will typically find in CNC router bits. You will have the straight flute, like that. You'll have the forward spiral, or what's called an up bit, or a reverse spiral, also called a down bit. Now there's a 4th kind called a compression bit, which is a combination of these 2 here, which I am not going to get into in this video because I don't have a compression bit. Now each one has different characteristics to it. First, we're going to talk about the straight bit. As the straight bit is turning, it is literally shearing away the entire length of the material that it is cutting.
Okay, so sometimes explaining it in a technical sense just doesn't register. So I decided we're going to demonstrate this by cutting the cheese. Yeah, literally, I'm going to demonstrate this with a knife and a block of cheese. This is going to give you the aha moment to understand why the cutting edges are so different. So let me show you something a little interesting.
So we have this nice piece of oak I am going to turn into a little cheese board. But let's just pretend this is your piece of wood, and you're using this router bit, which is spinning around, and every time it's spinning around, it is slapping the wood and trying to shave that entire length off at one time. It's kind of like taking a knife and slicing your cheese like that. You have to use extra force with both hands to make that cut. However, when you're using a spiral bit, it's basically shaving like that, which is much easier to do and explains why the spiral works so much better. This kind of cut when this bit is coming around and striking each time, it's called an interrupted cut. And that interruption sends a lot of force back into the bit where it kicks it back and sends that vibration up into your router, and the router bounces back and this bounces back, so it's constantly doing bouncing. Where the corkscrew shape of the spiral bit, either an up or down bit, does not do that. It's called a continuous cut. So think of slicing the cheese when you're buying CNC router bits.
Let's get back to the show.
You want to avoid this when you can. There are many cases where you cannot, such as a bit like this surfacing bit here or this bowl cutter right here. But that's where the sharpness of your edge comes in as well. So let's talk more about the spirals. As the spiral bit, the up spiral or up bit, is turning and cutting through material, the wood chips are riding up the flute and ejecting out of your job. And that's good because that leaves all that material clear. On the contrary, the down bit is shearing downward and pushing all your chips down to the bottom. This is good for finish passes for some things. The drawback to this is if you have to have a deep slot, there is no place for these chips to be ejected to. Nothing is there to pull them out. And so they will build up. And if you have to make multiple passes around, the router bit has to work around that. And that makes your cut a lot rougher. Now, the down bit is actually probably the most common bit people use as opposed to using an up bit. The up bit ejects all your material out. The con to that is that it's also ripping the edge of your wood. So as the bit is rotating, it is pulling the chips upward and leaving a rough edge along the top corner, leaving something for you to sand. Whereas the down bit cleanly shears it away and you have a nice clean corner along the cut line. Here's an example of the difference. This first cut is with a down bit. And the next one, this one, is an up bit. Now, if you look at the cuts up close, the one on the right is with the down bit. You can see that the corners are very clean and you don't have to sand them. Whereas with the up bit, the corners are rough. You're going to have to sand some wood away from that one. The other difference that you will find between up bits and down bits are the bottom of the bit itself. I have to rotate this one so you can see it. Now you can see on this down cutting bit, there's a little bit of a V cut into it. That's leaving clearance for any material that's going to be down at the bottom because all the chips are going to be piling up down there, so you get some clearance for the chips to exit out behind the router bit. And you'll notice on the up bit is much different. It's actually flat. I want to rotate this. It's flat, and so that allows it to cut a smoother surface along the bottom. Also, with that, the flat bottom bits also have a bevel on them just like that, and the cutting edge goes all the way up to the middle. This enables them to do some drill work or plunge work as opposed to this bit. This bit is not good for much plunging because there is no forward cutting blade on it. It's essentially scraping the surface. Now you can see, let's take a closer look at that. They've got a little bit of a forward cut right there at the bottom. But overall, this is not meant to plunge. So when you are doing work, the router bit actually has to plunge into the material. But this one, you cannot go in that far, and you want to do more of a ramp plunge, which I talk about in other videos. The up spiral, you can do a direct plunge. This is good for hogging out a lot of material in a pocket or something like that, whereas this is good for having nice clean edges along the cut line and having nice square edges down the bottom of the cut as well, which this will do too. So now you understand the flutes.
Well, we've gotten into this a little bit, and if you're finding this information helpful, then maybe you can give me a thumbs up and perhaps a comment down below. And by the way, if you're brand new to CNC routers and you're still struggling through the design work or the router itself, you might want to consider subscribing to this channel, because that's what I teach here. And I dive in so people understand it. And in case you're like wanting to make some money with your CNC router, I teach CNC entrepreneurialism as well. So take a look down below. There's a link to get into the CNC Entrepreneurs Facebook group. All right, well, with that being said, and the like you've given me just now, let's dive back in. We're going to talk about the coating that they put on routers, bits, and whether you really actually need it or not. So let's get into that.
Coating is a chemical or metal that's been bonded to the underlying tool. Now you can see in this end mill, it's nice and shiny and uniform in color. It has no coating on it. Whereas this end mill does have a coating on it. It's black. Same with this facing bit here. This does not have any coating that's been bonded to the metal, whereas this one does. Now the coating is bonded either chemically or electrically. The different kinds of coatings that can be applied are this black oxide. This is something you would find on drill bits. And then you'll see cobalt. That's when you see the gold drill bits. Then there's tungsten that can be coated. Titanium. The one thing I want you to understand, coating is not something that's adding strength to your router bit. Meaning it's not going to make the strength of the cutting edge stronger. What coating is intended to do is to be a heat barrier. Coatings are only a few atoms thick, so they can't have that much strength to them. As a CNC machinist for many years cutting metal, my professional opinion is it's not really something that you need. We didn't necessarily like it, and personally, I always felt that a coating seemed to reduce the quality of the cut or a rougher cutting surface on the end result after the tool made its pass. The thing with coatings, it always adds expense to your tool. And at the same time, the companies make claims that the router bit is going to last 4 times longer, 10 times longer. That's neither here nor there without the evidence. Being someone who's been an engineer as well, show me the data. But I can say as a CNC machinist who's been in it for many years, coating is not necessary, and all it does is add to the expense of the bits that you're buying. And the bits usually break before the coating breaks down anyway. So you might want to save yourself a little bit of money and don't necessarily worry about the coating bits or the coated bits. The bare bits, the naked bits will do just as well.
Who would have thought that coating wasn't really necessary? It does a couple other things. It like reduces the friction of the bit depending on what the coating is. But again, like I said, I never found it to be something that really made a difference in the life of the tool. So what we're going to talk about now is what the router bit is actually made of. Because router bits are made from different steels, and that's going to make a huge, huge difference on the life of your bit and the sharpness that it's going to retain. So let's talk a little bit about high-speed steel and carbide steel and some of the other metals that are sometimes put in these things. Let's go.
When you get a CNC router bit, there's typically going to be 2 types of materials that they are made from. One is carbide steel and the other is high-speed steel. Now the bodies of the router bits may be a different steel altogether, but what I'm talking about that's really important to you is the cutting edge material. Now there's carbide steel is a metal that has tungsten in it and a high level of carbon and is prepared in a certain way, which gives it a very high tensile strength as well as a very high heat tolerance and a high abrasion resistance, whereas high-speed steel is much lower on the scale of all these things. So let's just take a look at the difference. First of all, carbide steel all around is much more expensive because it's a harder metal to process. However, the upside is it lasts about 20 to 50 times better than your high-speed steel bits. High-speed steel bits are what your drill bits are made from. And they are made in a way where the molecular grain is looser so that it can give more during the drilling process and handle the torque that's being applied. Basically, high-speed steel has a springiness to it, whereas carbide steel does not. So that's what makes this so much better. With high-speed steel bits, you'll tend to have a worse finish and the bit will break down much faster. This is a high-speed steel router bit. And you can see there's burn on there. This is a carbide router bit, and you can see there is no burn on there. You might think this is new, but it's not. I just keep it protected because these are expensive bits. In a case like these two, the carbide is actually soldered or brazed onto a different material. Because the cost of carbide, you don't want all this to be carbide, just the cutting edges. And that's the same there. This is a carbide blade that goes here, and there's one right there on this bull bit. Now this is a slightly different surfacing bit, and the only reason I have two of these is because I ordered a kit once. I am going to tell you every bit that you need, and I'm going to give you links to everything so you don't have to go searching anymore. So by the time you're done and you order your bits, you will have everything you need to do 99% of your work. Now I want you to notice something here on these bits. This particular one is a Chinese-made bit. This one is a brand name bit, a Mana, and this is also a brand name bit. So there are two primary companies out there that make CNC router bits. One is White House, and the other one, I apologize, I don't remember what that company's name is, but you can tell that they construct things in a different way. We are going to show you these two. This one is a White House brand. And I want you to take a look at something that surprised me. Do you see the condition of the shank? This is telling me that they are using a softer metal than what they should be, or it has not been heat treated properly. I can feel the grain with my fingernail, which tells me that it was not ground very well. But you see all these little black spots in there. What that is when the grinding wheel was working this to get it to the proper size, the metal was soft enough that it was rolling over. It was actually galling in there. Galling is a thing that happens in metal. When it gets soft, it'll stick to other things. It'll roll. Basically, this metal is too malleable for me, which was actually pretty disappointing for White House, White side. It was disappointing to see that. Whereas this one is also a white side, but they constructed this quite different. Now you can see a lot of grind marks on this too. So there's using two different materials on this. So I just discovered that that's a white side as well, even though I bought them from different places. Whereas your carbide bodies are completely made of carbide. What you will not find in carbide is that galling that's going on in this particular material. Now, this doesn't mean it's a bad bit to be working with, but it does tell me that this bit is going to vibrate a bit more if it's not butted all the way into the nut of the router, because it is softer. Now I have one other surfacing bit here, and this is an Amana. So Amana is the other manufacturer. And I can tell right off the bat that this is a much higher grade material for the body of the router bit, but it's got a very nice edge on it. And this is actually a very good CNC router bit. This is a 1 1/8 inch diameter surfacing bit. And the other benefit is it's got a very tall blade here, so you can cut out a good half of an inch of material at one time.
Well, you've been here for quite a while, and you've been learning a lot of information, more than what anybody else tends to teach you in YouTube. I'm going to talk about one thing that most people don't talk about: the cheap bits, the junk bits, some of the cheap Chinese-made bits. So when you're buying a CNC router bit like this one, and it costs maybe $6 or $7 for this or for a set, you know already that you're buying a piece of junk, and it's not going to last very long. And I do the same thing, and I usually regret the decision up front. However, it's not always a bad decision to buy something to practice with. But I want to give you a little heads up and a couple of points. First of all, you are not going to get good quality cuts out of these things, at least not for very long. They are made poorly, and they're ground poorly, the grinding on the cut, and the material doesn't hold up because it's not made of carbide, sometimes not even made of high-speed steel. Now, I want to be careful. I'm not going to knock all Chinese products because they're not all bad. In fact, I do recommend a couple of Chinese-made router bits. Basically, what I am telling you is when you're buying a router bit and you're doing that, oh my God, it's cost so much. And so you jump over to the other side where it costs almost nothing. You're getting what you pay for. Now, one of the problems is there's very few router bits in between as far as price goes. Well, I'm going to solve that problem for you as we talk about the bits that you need. So right now we are going to get into demonstration, and then we're going to talk about the router bits you need and what you don't need, and I'll provide all the resources for you. So let's start getting to some demonstration.
The bits that I am going to be demonstrating are the incredible detail that you can get with a 30-degree V-bit, the flat bottom 1/8 inch diameter down cutting end mill. You're going to watch the ball nose 1/4 inch end mill and a 90-degree V-bit doing some lettering. And I'm going to show you the T-slot cutter and a little interesting thing you can do with that. And I'm going to show you the bowl cutter in action, which you'll want to see. What I am not going to show you is the carving bit because I don't have much experience with that, so I didn't want to risk working with that yet. I'm not going to show you the surfacing bit because I've got a video that goes through this in quite a bit of detail and gives you a discount code for this thing too. So the link for that will be down below. Nor will I go through the diamond drag bit because I've got a video that dives deep into this and some of the incredible projects you can do with a drag bit. There'll be links for that down below as well. You want to go watch that. It's my favorite thing to do. All right, let's get into demonstrations. So the first tool that we are going to be looking at is the 1/4 inch diameter ball nose end mill. And you see the top of the cut is already very crisp. Now that takes a certain technique, and that technique is to just bring the router bit down the radius of the end mill. So this is a 1/4 inch diameter. You want to bring it down by 1/8 of an inch on this first cut, and you'll get a very crisp cut that way. And you can see how clean this cut is and how clean the edges are. You remember the up bit was pretty messy, so that worked like a down bit. Now what we're looking at here is the bowl cutter. Now right now it is doing a ramp in as it's going down to its depth, and then it's going to go into full speed, which is about 55 inches per minute. And you can see that the bowl cutter is running really, really cleanly. That's what I really like about this bit. It's pricey, but it cuts really, really well. And this whole cut probably took about 5 minutes, I think. You can see there's a little bit of tool mark along the bottom, but that's pretty insignificant. relatively speaking. It's easy to sand out. And you see overall the finish is really nice. It's the raised area is not that big of a deal. I mean, you can't really feel it. And then the radius along the side, very clean. I really like this bit. I do recommend it if you decide to get into this cupping. Now we are going to work in the ball nose again. This is the 1/4 inch, and we are going to start working on this little sign that I'm making for you just to demonstrate everything. So it's just going to cut a little line, and what it's doing is doing a little ramp in, and then it's coming across and doing this cut. Now I don't think I really set it properly on this one because it did leave a little bit of an edge along there. You can see that, but it's very fine. It's easy to sand out. In fact, you'll see at the end how easy that is to sand out, but still clean. So this is the down cutting 1/8 inch end mill, and we're going to cut my part of my logo, which looks like it's an end mill, which you are going to see. This is good for the smaller detail because you don't have to sand that stuff. And you're getting into small bits like this, then you start working on lots of detail, and that means a lot of stuff to sand. Now, this is also good for getting into letters and things like that inside the smaller areas. Now, you see right in the middle of that cut, there's a little bit of a dip. That's not from the end mill. That is from the router itself. So I had to do a little bit of an adjustment on it. And now it's time for V-grooving. This is one of my favorite things to do when you make the lettering and what have you. We are going to V-groove out my logo. I made a mistake with my safe Z height. It pulls up way high after each cut, which makes it take a lot more time. But overall, you get really crisp cuts. Now this is, what I'm showing you is with carbide end mills. V-carving is one of my favorite things to do. You just do all kinds of cool stuff. I mean, this is so basic here. When you get to know it, you'll understand. So that looks pretty cool, but wait till you see what the 30-degree V-bit does. Now, I want you to take a look at this. It's got a cutting blade on it. When you buy your V-bits, they're usually flat like this one on the right. And what that does is that scrapes the cut and leaves a burr, whereas this one has a cutting blade on it. Let me turn it up so you can tell. And that cutting blade makes for a very smooth cut, and your end results after sanding is pretty incredible. Now, what you're watching here, keep in mind that whole shaft of that CNC router bit, the 30-degree, is 1/4 inch, and look how fine this is. This thing is razor sharp. You touch the edge, it pokes you and it hurts. It's also made of carbide. Don't get anything but carbide tools, or at least carbide inserts on your tools. And let's speed this up a little bit. So this whole run took about maybe 10 minutes to do both of these swirls and a little bit of sanding. And look how fine that detail is. Now look at that little line towards the top relative to the size of my finger. This is how clean you can get it when you got the right kind of router bits. The entire swirl is small, and it's got so much crispness and detail to it. So there's the little sign. Unfortunately, I came across a knot, and that kind of ruined it. But we're going to do a T-slot cutter now. T-slot cutters are bit challenging to program. In fact, I will probably put some programs together and make them available to people who have signed up on my CNC Insiders list. The T-slot cutters are there to cut the slots so that you can hang signs without them falling off. As you can see here, there's a recess in the slot. And you just put a screw into it, and there you go, or your nail on the wall. Now I'm going to do something a little interesting with the T-slot cutter. This just came to me as I was doing this. I thought sometimes we need something that we can turn. And so I got a little creative and showed you that you can do anything you want with this kind of stuff. I could have made this in an S shape or anything like that. So there you go.
Whew, lots of information. You've been around here for quite a while learning this stuff. That tells me that you're serious about this. I gotta pat you on the back for that. So what we're going to do is do a quick rehash, and then we're going to get into the stuff you need to get, and I'll tell you all the resources so you can get it. You don't have to go searching around. So let's do the final wrap up here, and if you haven't already and you found this useful, give me a thumbs up, and I'd love to see a comment from you. And yeah, join CNC Entrepreneurs. Down below is a link where you can sign up to the CNC Insiders, and I'll tell you why that's going to benefit you in just a moment. All right, let's rehash.
First thing I want to say is congratulations. You have been through a technical training course on CNC router bits at the engineering level. You now know a lot more than the majority of CNC router owners out there. What you've learned are there are 8 general families of CNC router bits. You've got the flat bottom end mills, the V-groove cutters, the ball nose end mills, drag bits, T-slot cutters, facing or surfacing bits, the hogging bits, and the carving bits. You know that what they're made of is crucial if you are going to get a good quality cut and the life out of your CNC router bit. You've also learned how to cut the cheese, so I mean you got to hand it to you for that, because everybody needs to know how to do that. You've had some demonstrations so you understand some of this stuff. And again, I just remind you, there are videos down below that gives you demonstration on the diamond drag bit and on the surfacing cutter. You'll want to go watch those to get a deep dive education into those two. So now it comes down to, what do you need to get? I mean, you look at my selection here, or my collection, and you see that I have got all kinds of bits. Well, some of these are duplicates. Some of them, they came because I bought a set. There's others that are backups. Well, let's talk about what you actually need to start with and what you can wait on. And we're going to start with what you can wait on. So the first one I'm just going to strike off your list is the carving bit. This is an advanced level type of bit where your bit is doing a lot of detail and it's going to run for a very long time, and to learn how to program the machine to do this takes some skill. So you're not going to be diving into this very quickly if you are a beginner CNCer. So just hold off on this until you're ready to get to the more advanced stuff. The next one that you are not necessarily going to need right up front is the drag bit. Unless you're going to get into glass engraving or you want to do cutting out of patterns, then you may want to look into like drag knives or the diamond drag bit. Watch the video that I made on that, and then you'll know. I mean, personally, it's my favorite thing to do is engrave on glass and metal, and so I always recommend getting that bit. But go check the video out for that. The T-slot cutter is not something you're necessarily going to need up front unless you plan on making signs. Then you are absolutely going to need a T-slot cutter. You have the hogging bit, the bowl cutter. This is a very good bit, but until you are going to be getting into some contour type of work that's going to require a lot of wood removal, you don't necessarily want this. So that rules the things out that you don't necessarily need right up front. What you do absolutely have to get right away that you will be using are your flat bottom end mills, your V-groove cutters, and then your surfacing bit, and then your ball nose bits. So let's talk a little bit about these. First, we're going to talk about the end mills. You will absolutely want the 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch and 1/16 inch end mills, the flat bottoms. This is going to be actually the majority of the work that you do with the 1/4 inch. The 1/8 inch will be the second, and then the 16th inch will be when you get into detail work. The next batch is the 90, 60 degree, and 30 degree V-bits. Now there are 20 degree V-bits, like that, and there's 120 degree V-bits. You won't need those just yet. The next one you'll need after that is the 120. It's for much larger lettering. But you are going to be doing a lot of lettering. It's just by default. So this is the next most important batch of bits you're going to want. And then you're going to want to get into the ball nose. The ball nose gives you the detail, the roundedness. You can follow contours or signs to give a nice little edge to them. And the other one is the facing bit. You will absolutely have to have that. When you get your CNC router, you often have to get in there and surface your spoil board right away because you want the spoil board to be flat with the router itself. And this is also great for conditioning warped boards or botched projects. So where do you get all these bits? Well, I am going to provide a list for you. There's going to be a link down below that you can download, and it's going to have pictures of all the bits. It's going to have a little description of what the bit does, and I'll have 2 links for each one: the practice bits when applicable and the good bits that you want. And I'll provide the suppliers. Now, what you will find, if you've done any research, that there are no complete sets available. The big box companies understand this, and that's why you can't find a complete set. So you have to buy a piece at a time. And if you've started buying already, you already know that you're getting into upper $200, maybe over $300 to get your high quality bits. I had the same problem. I got frustrated with it. I saw other people had the same problem, and they were frustrated. So I went ahead and sourced router bits. So I sell the complete set here for much less than what the big box sells them for. But I'm going to take this to another level, something that the big boys don't do. One of the most important things when it comes to CNC router bits are the feeds and speeds. It doesn't matter what metal your router bit is made of. If your feeds and speeds aren't set up properly, then you're going to overheat your bit too quickly, and it's going to go bad no matter, even if it's carbide. So the big box stores, when you buy the bits, they usually don't provide the feeds tables that you need. You have to go searching for it. So if you decide to buy this set of bits, the first thing I'm going to give you is the feeds and speeds table. That's going to include what you need to set up your bits for in your tool libraries for all of these. And I'll give you a feeds and speeds for that too. Now, I am going to provide a discount code for this guy. This is the Chinese bit that I made the video on, which I was very impressed with. There's going to be a link down for that, and I'll give you a discount code on that. It comes off of Amazon. However, if you have a much more robust machine, then you're going to want to get the better bit, the Amana. This is quite a bit pricier, but that sheet that I'm going to give you is going to have links for both of these on it anyway. But I'm going to take it a step up a little more. I'm going to give you a 9th bit, and this is a 1/8 inch diameter upcutting drilling end mill. So it's got a very fast spiral to it, and it's good for doing some of your detail work, but it also has a beveled point on it so it can do lots of plunge drilling. That's pretty unusual in CNC router bits. So that's going to be included. And because this is an 1/8 inch diameter and your router is probably a 1/4 inch, I am going to give you collets as well so you can adapt your router bits to your collet. You basically just slip the bit into the collet, slip it up in the nut, and you're ready to rock and roll. So you're going to get collets with that as well. Now, I'm going to give you some more stuff too. Companies don't do this, do they? When people make CNC projects, when people buy CNC projects, they're almost always buying projects that have words on it. And words are a big seller, so you are going to get the words that sell list. This is the top 50 words. I did a lot of research on this, and this list is pretty priceless. I mean, just think about it. Names are huge. The word home and welcome, baby names, and love, dream. You probably have one of these words sitting in your house somewhere, hanging on a wall or sitting on a shelf. So you're going to get the top 50 words that sell list. But I'm not done with you yet. You are also going to get some other stuff. I'm going to give you some vector files. Now, the first vector file I am going to give you is that. I'm going to give you the G-code file so you can take a piece of 2x6, put it on your CNC router, follow the instructions, and hit go, and in 10 minutes you'll have a place to put all your router bits. So let's talk about the other vector files I'm going to give you so you can get started into CNC routing. The first vector file you're going to get is this welcome sign. This is actually my best selling project on Etsy, and it looks like this when it's done. Let's maximize that. There you go. So it's got the contour up here, the swirls, it's got some swirl down here, and the lettering, of course, it's got drill holes, and it's profiled with a ball nose. Lots of little detail in it. So what you're going to get is this right here. And you'll be able to work with it, get your experience up. The next vector file you're going to get is this little Christmas block. Very simple. And it'll come with G-code as well, so all you have to do is follow the instructions, or you can set it up the way you want to and go at it. This is made with a 1/16 inch end mill all the way around. And then the next vector file you're going to get is the Warrior Woman. Now this is a project that's very dear to my heart. It took quite a while to actually draw this up, but it symbolizes the warrior spirit of people who deal with cancer, particularly women, since I lost my wife to cancer and my niece had a brain tumor a long time ago. So this is made for cancer survivors in my heart. And by the way, 5% of your purchase goes to St. Jude. So a little perk, you know, people like you and me, we donate, right? You're going to get this willow tree glass etching. You'll get the G-code file, and yeah, meet me by the willow. And then you'll also get this vector file right here, which is the tree of life. And this picture just does not do it justice. You can see the fine detail in here. Now, just so you know, these glass etchings are done with a drag bit, the diamond drag bit, but they can be engraved as well into wood. So you're not forced to buy a drag bit in order to make this happen. I just love the glass etching. There's lots of detail in this stuff, and they just come out pretty. This was actually a picture that I bought at Salvation Army, tore it apart, repainted, and then put the engraving on the glass, and that's what I got out of it.
That makes 9 carbide router bits that you're going to be getting. And collets. You're going to get the discount code for the surfacing bit, and you're going to get the feeds and speeds table, the top 50 words that sell it. You can start making on your CNC router today, or as soon as you get your CNC router bits. And then you're going to get the vector file for the block where you can put all your bits, and you're going to get the other vector files. Everything's got instructions to it. You'll be ready to go as soon as you get all your stuff collected and get them on your CNC router. It's time to stop searching and start cutting. So everything's laid out. I had the same problem that you have right now, trying to figure out all your router bits. It's solved. Go on down in the description. The link is down there to get your router bits now. So I look forward to sending them to you and the little extra perks I'm going to throw in the package with them. You'll see. Now this is Garrett. We've spent a lot of time together. I feel like I'm kind of a friend with you now, right? So yeah, I can't wait to see what you end up making with your CNC router. I'm going to check out, take a little bit of a nap, because I spent a lot of time putting this together just for you, so you are now where you're at, like better than other CNC router owners. You get technical knowledge that most people don't have. All right, I hope you have a great day and a better tomorrow, and I'll see you next time.